Welcome, everybody. This is Keston and Ben, and we are delighted to have with us once again Matt Nelson, president of CGC. The first question that we have for Matt is, what is a classic comic book cover, and why the heck do collectors love it so much?
I think it's important to point out that the Golden Age has a pretty broad range of classic covers. And I think the reason for that is because it's pre-code, the war was going on, at least in the 40s. And so, like the number one thing that seems to jump out to me is sex and violence. We're always, people are always interested in that kind of stuff. And then obviously you've got certain compositions, very exceptional compositions, covers that are drawn in a very cool way, like Hit 5. Stereotypes to some degree, attract some collectors. And then you have like war comics. And so war comics are interesting because they kind of tie all those things together in some form or fashion. Obviously you've got the violence aspect and maybe sometimes some stereotypes. And also historical figures and famous people. In the case of World War II, like Hitler, Tojo, and Mussolini. And so, war covers do a good job of tying all those things together, especially when you have exceptional compositions, which would be like, your main guy is going to be Schomburg. So when you've got a Schomburg cover with all this crazy stuff going on, great composition, got some violence in there, got, some stereotypes maybe. That's the most eye-popping covers of the Golden Age. Yeah, the Suspense 3 to me is like the perfect combination of a lot of those aspects. Like you've got, the Nazis, you've got the girl in bondage, you've got violence in there. You got obviously Schomburg. The composition is great. So I think those that's probably what makes that cover so great, is because it's a combination of so many of those aspects. It's Detective 31. That's a classic composition, and that's a good example of how in Hit 5 where all the other aspects are absent. There is no sex, there is no violence, there is no war theme going on or anything like that. It is just a great cover with that character on there.
I do think sometimes classic is maybe overused, kind of like how we say, oh, I love time leaves, or I love, applesauce. Sometimes the word classic gets thrown around a lot in our industry. But is there any reason why you don't hear the word classic maybe in Silver Age or in Bronze? I mean, I never hear, oh, this is a classic Spider-Man cover. I mean, it's not even denoted anywhere.
Yeah, I think maybe it has to do with more the fact that, those books are more about the storylines. People read more of that. And, the storylines continue, have the crossovers, the continuation of the character plots. And so maybe people are less focused on the covers and more just about the titles and the characters. I mean, maybe that's it, because the Golden Age are kind of, they're almost like standalone books, because, a lot of people don't read them these days anymore. They do out of, fascination, curiosity, but they're not, there's not a lot of people sitting down and reading the whole run of Black Terror, so, once they're in holders, especially, then it's like, it comes down to the cover. So maybe that's why the term classic is used more in the Golden Age. By the 50s, I think with the code coming in, it kind of did away with a lot of that. The war was obviously over, and then sex and violence was reduced, and stereotypes to some degree. A lot of comics have been whitewashed by that point. You really don't have the same broad range or the possibility of these classic covers coming up after that period. But then you have like the other aspect of classic covers that really, I think, came to rise more at that time, which is the arch nemesis on the cover. And that was the case with Batman. Obviously all the Joker covers are famous. And then when you get into the Silver Age, then it's obviously got a lot more of that going on with Marvel and DC as well. And so I think that probably makes up more of your classic covers from the Silver Age on, are, great compositions and great characters, two characters duking it out. And that's probably what you see more from that era on.
Are there any books in particular that CGC has either added the classic designation to or taken away?
Pretty sure we remove very little once it's on the label, unless it's incorrect. I think that would really upset a lot of people, particularly people that own the book for that reason.
Matt, I'm going to tell you a deep, dark secret, but if you ever want to smite old Ben, all you have to do is take the classic cover designation off of Marvel Mystery 9.
How a book becomes considered a classic cover or has a classic cover. I think it's organic. Like as you said, anyone can call a cover a classic, but there has to be kind of a surge of collector interest to kind of put some weight behind that. Nowadays, obviously, people can light the fuse. They can go on YouTube or, back in the day, they write an article about it in the CBM, and people would go, "Wow, yeah, I didn't notice that cover." The journals, the photojournals coming out, opening people's eyes to that. But ultimately, it's organic. It has to. Enough people have to be attracted to it to start collecting it. Like Punch 12. I mean, that sat dormant for years. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, a few years ago, everyone's chasing that book and it skyrockets in price. I'm not sure off the top of my head if Punch 12 has the term classic cover on it. One could go back and look at the old, say, the Heritage Archives, look at copies that were graded earlier, because there's a lot of stuff that's added to the labels as time goes on, and you'll notice a lot of stuff is conspicuously absent, especially in the first 5 or 10 years.
By the way, thank you for adding to Cap 2 the first appearance of the round shield on those labels.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have a team, a research team that we get requests for often about putting things on labels, all kind of things. So yeah, if anybody's interested, they've noticed something they think should be on the label, reach out to us, and we'll certainly do the research on it and make a decision if we're going to add it or not.